All right, so usually the first thing that I ask people is, why do you want this job? In this case, I think the question would be, why do you still want this job?
The easy answer is that Seattle still is not delivering on its promises to us, and I still think that this city has incredible potential that goes unrealized every day. I mean, I know when I first started thinking about politics in Seattle and being involved in my neighborhood, it was 2010, we were 5 years into King County's plan to end homelessness, and I thought this city was amazing, but it could do better. And over the last, 13 years, I haven't seen things get better. And so I still want this job because I believe that my experience and my background put me in a position to actually be able to help this city take its next step and hopefully start repairing some of the things that have gone on over the last 3 years with the pandemic and just fix some of these long-term problems that we've been having.
So, what do you think really has changed in the past, 4 years since last you tried?
Well, I mean, the biggest thing that's changed, like I said, is that I haven't seen any of the things that were talked about back in 2019 about really changing the city haven't happened. But then again, having a pandemic, having a West Seattle bridge closure, all of these things have impacted this city. We're talking about working remotely now more. We've got a downtown corridor that has not done well. And we're having staffing shortages with the police. And we do just... it's been a difficult time for a lot of people. I mean, right now I work as an administrative law judge hearing appeals on unemployment cases, and the stories that I hear from what people have experienced over the last few years about, not having childcare, not having their kids in school, losing jobs, not being able to go back to the workforce, and all of these things mount up. And so what I really see is that over the last 4 years, we've gone through a very, very difficult time. And I think in general, we've had an amazingly resilient city to it, but I think there are a lot of things that we need to do now as we're really kind of coming out and we're recreating Seattle in this new post-pandemic world.
So how have you changed and evolved in the past 4 years?
I would say the biggest thing is that actually over the last 4 years, I've kind of focused much more on my family and my immediate neighborhood. After last time, I kept doing all the things I was still doing with the Morgan Community Association and doing fundraisers for the food bank and the helpline and things like that. And in fact, actually, when the city when COVID first closed things down, the municipal court closed, the district court closed it, so I didn't have as much work, so I started doing deliveries for the West Seattle Food Bank. And it actually gave me a chance to get out and talk more to the people who are just on the ground having troubles on a day-to-day basis and who need help and who want the help. I know I helped put together a thing called West Seattle Supports when we were trying to just put people together with, they needed bedding, they needed food, they needed, where can I go find out if there's money for housing? And we tried to help some people out doing that. And then with the West Seattle Bridge shutting down, I got called immediately by several people saying, what are we going to do? And there was a guy named Kevin Brovelite who actually started this thing called West Seattle Bridge Now. And I joined in with him, and we ended up pulling together more than 5,000 people to actually give the people of West Seattle a seat at the table at the West Seattle Bridge Task Force. And again, it gave me another incredible insight into just how District 1 functions and, how important the bridge can be for people getting to doctors, getting to jobs, just not feeling completely isolated, the problems that the businesses had, being able to actually get the supplies they needed. So I guess what I'm saying is over the last 4 years, I have seen a lot of the close-up issues that people go into and the fact that delivering services better to people, sort of efficiently and fairly, is something that the city needs to focus better on. So what I've watched is just the specific ground level things that I think Seattle hasn't done well by its people to really make this the healthy, prosperous city it's supposed to be. And in doing that, I really focused on what could be better here. What I'd like to see change. And that's why I didn't think that I would run again. And then when Lisa announced that she was stepping down, the immediate response I had in my own mind was, I still want to do that. I still want to take what I know, apply it to this city, and help the people that I've been helping on a small level, but help them on a greater level. And so I think it actually, it really solidified my resolve with respect to just wanting to do a job like that. And so I'm hoping what I've seen and learned on the ground from the people that I've dealt with between my clients in public defense cases and the people I've seen in front of me as an administrative law judge, just bring those lessons to the table. And so I think I've grown a lot in terms of realizing that helping people is not about grand ideas. Helping people is not about coming up with huge solutions, but it's actually just plainly about public service and about making sure a city does the little things that it's supposed to do for people.
So what specifically, when we talk to people, I still don't get a lot of specifics about what you think that you actually could accomplish as a council person. Obviously, the sort of thing you just mentioned is the kind of thing where you have a staff of 2 or 3 assistants and they handle a lot of constituent inquiries.
Right.
But beyond that, there's also the legislative angle.
Right. Well, I mean, it's difficult. With Seattle City Council, over the course of 4 years being in a position, you can't necessarily get that much done on a legislative side. I mean, the process takes, in the neighborhood of about 9 months to get some new legislation through. And there's limited resources. Like you said, you've got 9 council members with 4 or 5 staff members each and a central staff that's only around 20 people. So that's, you're looking at 50 to 60 people compared to the 12,000 that are in the city departments that the mayor oversees. And so you're limited in what you can do. And so I think to that extent, instead of focusing on big new legislation and big ideas, it's just about public service. It's about, fixing a pothole, fixing a street light. Now specifically, like for example, right now we have an incredible staffing problem with the police. And from all the people I talk to, one of the biggest issues people have right now is just general public safety. Just a rise in crime, whether it be towards businesses or individuals, and what we've seen here in West Seattle. So in order to do that, in order to fix that problem, the first thing that has to happen is we got to take care of the contract. Like there's no contract that the police are under right now, and that's now 24 months overdue. And with the way that cycle typically works, of every 2 years negotiating the new contract, we are already going into that period of time that we should be looking at the next contract, but we still have the last one to deal with. And when we're talking about trying to bring officers to the city of Seattle, it's hard to bring people to work in a place where they won't have a contract. And so, making sure that the contract negotiations get done and in place is a huge part of things. The fact that this city has actually learned a lot over the time where we've had the consent decree from the Justice Department about better accountability and about better practices and working on bringing more non-armed officers or non-armed people into dealing with people in crisis. And that means, supporting our collaborative policing bureau, which I think they're now getting onto line more of their community service officers, that I believe they actually have staffing now to go to 6 supervisors and 20 community service officers. And these are people that don't go through the full academy, they're not armed, but they can be there to help. Looking at other ways to be much more preventative. And that means working with the police department to get them fully staffed so they have the people that they can have on a walking beat, that they can have better response times to 911 calls, that we can actually be preventative with patrols. One of the things that's really interesting is, someone gave me a great analogy about how it's like being on a flooded river and there's constantly people flowing down the river who are drowning and in trouble, and we spend so much time and effort and money grabbing each drowning person as they come by, yet what we need to do is we need to go back at the source and find out why they're falling into the river. And so the specific things that are involved there are increasing our permanent supportive housing, so that people not only can get housed, but can get attached to services to help deal with mental health issues, to help deal with substance abuse disease issues, and to actually get them into a house, but then prepared to be able to stay in that. The fact that we need more diverse array of shelters. We need shelters in this city that can stay open longer, that can accommodate, someone who's got a job, and when they get off their job, the shelter's already closed. They don't have a place to go. And so shelters that can allow someone with a pet to come there, or 2 people who are a couple but they're not married and be there. So small things that we could do to actually very quickly help the tools that the people we've got out there get people into housing, help deal with criminal issues. looking at the fact that our homeless population in the city is very large, but it's really only a minority of those people in that population that are taking advantage of the other people in that population and the people living around them. The ones that are stealing bikes and breaking into businesses and stealing things. We can work on doing a tremendous amount to affect those things if we just let the money that's been spent on studying what to do and the departments that have people on the ground who know what to do, just let them do their job. One of the things I keep hearing is that every couple of years we bring in a new batch of council members and they have big new projects and they want to take money out of one pot and put it over here, and then they have to create the administration to actually deal out that money, and they come up with the ideas that are part of their political promises to get into offices, and then they focus on fulfilling those promises with these big ideas. And everything I hear from people in the departments is to just stop. Just have a council that is much better at stepping back and letting them do their job. The council watches the budget. You occasionally get to create some new legislation. You have to be amazing at constituent services to listen to people. You have to be able to use that pulpit to do positive things. For example, there is money that the city has set aside for a safe lot for RVs. They've given that project to Lehigh, but they haven't been able to locate a place to put it. So here's an example where we don't need a new big idea of what do we need to do with people living in RVs to get them someplace safe. We started it. So now we need a council member that has the connections with people in the city and the ability to walk into any office and talk to someone about where do we find space? Where can we get a lot to put these people? And like I was saying with the police, it's very similar. That with the consent decree, we've got the Office of the Inspector General, we've got the Office of Police Accountability, and we have the Community Police Commission. These are three wonderful entities that can do a lot to oversee the police. We've spent a lot of money through the consent decree coming up with ideas on how we can police better, how we can rebuild our police force. And the money has been spent, and the ideas are there. We just need to shepherd them through. And primarily, the big thing is standing back and not always coming up with something new to just stop the simple, low-level things on the ground from just getting done. And I think I've realized that no matter what I say, I'm always going to be told that there need to be more specifics. But these are the things that we have to do. Like I said, it's the police contract, it's the office of, I'm sorry, not the office, but the Community Policing Bureau. These are, or the Collaborative Policing Bureau, sorry. We just have to need them. We have to let them do what they're ready to do and support them. We need a council that's going to work with the mayor, with the city attorney, with the police and the fire department to work all together. I don't think we've really been on the same page for a very long time, but I think it's starting to happen. Listening to Mayor Harrell's State of the City, I think there's a lot of good signs that people are starting to work together in government better just to get the basics done for people.
So you mentioned the police contract, and that was also in your press release the other day. Tell me about that. I really haven't heard that brought up by people much. Obviously, I'm sure it's a big topic in the police department quarters.
Yeah.
What's the situation there, and what sort of contract do you support?
I mean, the biggest thing. So there right now, I guess one of the biggest sticking points is on the police being able to appeal certain decisions that are disciplinary against them. There are a couple of other issues that are sort of smaller that are these sticking points where the city is looking for the police department to give more. The police just want to put this in place. Like I said, it's normally a long process. I mean, it's normally something that they plan ahead and do. It's just the fact that they can't seem to meet. They can't seem to reach this point where they can just sort of agree on, on salaries, on incentives, on whether or not they get to appeal certain decisions, on their indemnification, when something goes wrong on the job. And what I think is important is, for example, you said that people aren't talking about it. And really, that should be the starting place of this conversation. And so what I mean by that is that it's just a basic contract negotiation. We got two sides that have not finished coming together. But if we can't get the police department with a contract that actually sets out, what the accountability is, how do we grow the police force, how do we retain the police force that we have. If you don't get that basic down with just a finalized contract, you can't move on to the next step, which is starting to recruit and starting to hire. And it then actually creates other interesting problems down the line. For example, one of the things that happens is when the contract finally gets signed, then officers will end up receiving back pay for some of their overtime and some of the things that they're owed that will happen retroactively based on getting the new contract. And that creates a tremendous amount of pressure for the budget. For example, several years ago, there were the articles about certain police officers, getting over $300,000 a year. And a lot of that actually had to do that when the contract finally got signed and kicked in, that this pay went then retroactively to the officers. And it causes spending issues that we shouldn't have because we should have had it in place. So there's kind of a cascade effect that occurs with not having the contract in place. And then that can happen when you're putting a contract in place so late. And like I said, we're already 2 months into the process where we should be looking at the next one, not the past one. And so it's really just about the fact that if you're going to talk about the government and the police department being able to work together and being in lockstep and focusing on public safety issues and issues of accountability, that it's not going to happen if you don't get the basics. And that's the contract. And that's the understanding that the city government is supportive of the police department and helping the police department rebuild trust and respect with the people, and that it's one by one that these things have to happen. But I see the contract as the starting place. It's where we lay down the ground rules, we both agree, we both say we have a contract, and we let everybody move forward.
If I may, if we're going into a recession, then what?
Then what with respect to just in
The
general?
money, the money. You're talking about the money. So if we go into a recession, then what?
Well, so that's even a greater reason to get it done and not wait longer, so you're going to have these costs that build up. And look, the big question on everything is about how do you pay for these things? How do we pay for more supportive housing? How do we pay for more housing in general? And I actually believe that the biggest thing is looking at the efficiencies of the way we spend money. That we have a tendency in this city to spend money on things that sound nice as opposed to the things we specifically need. So to that extent, if we can keep from spending money we don't have to because we're trying to reinvent the wheel that's already been made, we can save some money that can go into plugging those gaps. We're looking at, I think a $200 million shortfall with respect to the budget coming up. And, we've seen like the Jumpstart tax has done a nice job about bringing some more money in. But I do believe fiscal responsibility is a bigger part of being prepared for a recession. Now, we saw back in 2008, the last time the city had a recession, that I think what happened then was we recovered actually pretty quickly compared to a lot of places in America. And it's because we are a vibrant city, we have companies that are doing incredible things, and we've got a lot of people that want to be part of that. There's a lot of will. I think we recovered quickly then. I think we'd look to recover pretty quickly with whatever comes down the road now. But it's going to be a faster recovery if we're fiscally responsible. I remember several years ago seeing a list of projects that were being looked at in the city. And these are small projects. These are neighborhood projects. And one of them was a $45,000 grant that the city gave to study whether or not an intersection in Fremont should be studied for change. And that is probably a very glaring example of what can go wrong, but that's one of those ways that we spend more than we need to. And we spend that because it's people trying to work on special projects rather than just working on the basics.
And you mentioned the supportive housing, the homeless issue. One thing that has changed since your last campaign was the establishment of the Regional Homelessness Agency.
Yes.
What do you think, in observing, at least from an outsider for starters, about how that's all working? There's been some friction, it seems, with the city and the funding that they want. And
there has. What I would say is that I think there's an excellent opportunity once they've got their plan in place, which I believe they're actually finalizing over the next month, for Seattle to be able to work with King County on this issue. The idea that they really do want to build more housing. They really do want to help people. They want to create good programs involving emergency vouchers to get people housed when they're in crisis. It's unfortunate that it's taken this long to get to this point. But again, when you're building something bureaucratic like that, you end up with taking a lot of time to put the administrative side in place, to put it there, to be able to actually take the money they've had for a while and put it to good use. But so this year is going to be where we see what their plan is that they roll out. And we can see how Seattle can support that its most effective way. And so the next council coming in is going to have to be prepared to work with the King County Regional Housing Authority and within the own departments, with the departments of Seattle, to just work on getting more housing, more services out there. So I'm waiting to see, like with everybody else. I think once that plan rolls out and they actually start implementing it and spending money, we'll know what Seattle can do to help. And I know for me, as one, I just want to see us spend money intelligently, spend it effectively, and just get people housed and get them to the wraparound services that they need.
On the issue of what we're spending that we shouldn't be on, and spending on new and shiny things. Obviously, the $45,000 example is an interesting little one, but that's just, at least in the terms of a city budget, $45,000. Are there bigger things that you think that they've wandered too far off on that should be pulled back or re-examined?
So there is luckily nothing I can point to over the last few years that I think was, that they wasted a large amount of money. I do think, though, that as you look at each of the departments and how they spend their money, I think you can find inefficiencies in that system. I know I've had people talk to me about SDOT and about public utilities and, other departments where they are not always spending money intelligently. And again, I know I keep seeing in the news where we find out we've hired, again, going back to the study ideas, hired someone else to study something, or we've brought someone in to come up with a plan. And from what I hear from people in departments is we've got those plans, and so I think there are times where we spend money on things we shouldn't, I know for me, for example, when the city came out with a statement condemning Iran for the treatment of protesters, I agree completely. I mean, what happened there was inappropriate, and making a statement against it, though, and spending time and money for the city, council staff to put that together. And again, that might be very small, but for me, it's symptomatic of an overall issue where we seem to care more about the activism, we seem to care more about the making a statement than we do about the basic things. And so I've got this sense, and it's backed up by the people that I've talked to in the departments, that we can be more efficient. And one of the things that our city charter points out is that we're supposed to be efficient about the way we give services out to the people of this city. And I question that it's happening. And so, with respect to the question about the recession coming up and what we're going to do with the spending, I think we've curtailed some of the big projects. I think we've focused our money in the right areas, but I think we need to keep doing that. I think we've had several years where we haven't been doing it, and now we're seeing the process actually get better. And so I think now it's just continuing what we've been doing in the last couple of years to go in the right direction.
So in terms of District 1 specifically, and I know, we have to get out of our mode of just thinking, West Seattle and South Park, because now we also have Georgetown and whatnot. But, so the West Seattle Bridge is fixed, thank heavens. What, besides the big issues like homelessness and public safety, do you think in terms of District 1 that you would want to, be watching for, be pushing for, if you get elected?
Well, one of the things is definitely transportation and Sound Transit 3. We're looking at light rail coming to West Seattle, and one of the plans that was put out actually is going to tear down a couple of buildings down off of Delridge. And, for example, West Seattle's largest current childcare program is set to be taken out. And when the city did its environmental impact statement and said that they went out and actually talked to the businesses in the area, their report said that no businesses were going to be affected by this, whereas it could not be farther from the truth. So making sure there's someone on top of that, and someone who is working with the city and the county as we try to bring light rail here, because I know Originally, light rail was going to be, here in the 2020s. Now we're looking at the 2030s. So transportation is a huge issue, and how we've moved to rapid ride and where we possibly need more access would be nice. But I think transportation is probably the single biggest area that doesn't get talked about a lot because it's not the public safety issue, it's not the homeless issue. But actually following that is the basic things. It's potholes and lights and getting, an overnight lot for RVs so that we don't have RVs that are on Harbor Island or, in different places, not Harbor Island, but Harbor Avenue, sorry, in different places around West Seattle. One of my things that's very small is by the West Seattle bowling alley. There's on Oregon Street, that intersection right next to the bowling alley has needed a crosswalk of some kind for a while. It's a dangerous intersection. And I even got the city to come out and look at it. And what I was told by the city was putting a crosswalk there would just give a false sense of security to people crossing the roads. They're not going to do it. And, District 1 needs a council member that's going to keep on top of that stuff, that's going to be very accessible. And the one thing Lisa's done is she's been considered great at constituent outreach, and I want to keep that up, making sure that anybody in West Seattle feels like they can actually reach their city council member and say, hey, I got a problem, or I've got an idea. And making sure that dialogue continues. And I know for myself, the fact that I run the trivia night at Talarico's, and every Wednesday I'm there at 8:30, and you could come see me. You could come tell me what the problem is. Or the fact that I'm going to be literally all over District 1 meeting with people and making sure that I'm accessible. So continuing to have an accessible city council member, and one that may even go to that next level and be more accessible to actually be able to reach out to everybody around and, just make sure that when people have an issue, they have some place to go.
So one last question for now. So somebody who didn't vote for you last time around, what would your pitch be if you met this person face to face and they said, so convince me why I should vote for you this time?
Right. Well, the primary thing I would say is this. We're in a situation where we're looking at a recession. Things are a little different than they were 4 years ago. If the last 4 years didn't go the way you wanted, then I would say, give me a shot now to show that I can do more. But specifically, we don't have an incumbent. And right now, you need to look at finding a representative that's got the right type of life experiences. So myself as a teacher and a lawyer and now a judge, and those 2 years of being an administrative law judge have given me an incredible sense of people on the ground and the troubles that they're going through in a way that I didn't have it before. But that I've continued to be involved. Like I said, when the bridge shut down, I got involved with the West Seattle Bridge Now program to give people a voice. When the courts shut down and I didn't have work, I started delivering food for the food bank, and I helped put together a website that helped put people together with things that people needed with the people that had stuff to give. And that you need someone who understands what that public service means. And, as a public defender for 15 years, that's what I've focused on. I want to help others, and I recognize that I'm in a position to hopefully understand what the people that I've been working with as clients and the people that have been before me, having a sense of what they need and what helps. And we have to have a council member now that's going to be able to understand the way city council functions, what they have to do to work within that budget that they're working with, and that it's not time for activism anymore. Like I said, I have a very simple sense that this is time for public service and not politics. And so what I would say is I've stayed involved. I'm still here. Talk to any of the people that support me about what I do for my community, because I care. And I will be accessible, and I will do everything in my power to make sure that all the experience I have and all the connections that I've made basically go to the advantage of the people that live here in District 1. And, I know a lot of people will say to me that I was in Amazon's back pocket last time. I know a lot of people specifically said they didn't vote for me because of Amazon. And what I would say to them is, look, I didn't take money from them. They gave a lot of money into a political action committee that did independent expenditures that they say, supported my candidacy. But a lot of it didn't help. a lot of the door knockers that they sent out did a bad job and it sabotaged my campaign. A lot of mailers they sent out were really kind of nasty towards Councilmember Herbold and did not represent the way I felt. And that I didn't ask for that help last time. I'm absolutely not asking for that help this time. And I'm not in anybody's back pocket. I'm just a District 1 resident who helps out here. You know, coach in bowling and raise money for the helpline and food bank. Well, not helpline anymore, but you know, the food bank and Southwest Youth and Family Services, and you know, just being here is, I think, the thing that I do very well, listening to people, staying involved, and also using my platform to help as much as I can. Like, a lot of times people just come to me and say, I'm having this issue with the Department of Transportation. I'm having this issue with permitting. I'm having this issue with the health department. What can you do to help? And I know a lot of people now. You know, after 20 years of working within the criminal justice system, I've got a lot of connections with people that know the things beyond what I know. And so I guess after that long answer, I would just say to people that I've got a great resume, I've got a track record with public service, and don't necessarily listen to things that get whispered about when you talk about whether or not Amazon bought and paid for me, because they didn't. You know, I mean, I can't say more than that other than to say I truly care. You can look at what I've done and come talk to me. You know, I would say to anybody that isn't sure, just sit down with me. Ask me questions. I am an open book with respect to that. So,
Okay,
Thank you. We'll talk again.
thank you.